Maya couldn't believe her luck when she found the perfect rental house on Oakwood Drive. After 2 years of cramped apartment living, this 3-bedroom house with a big backyard felt like a palace. The rent was reasonable. The neighborhood looked clean and quiet, and best of all, pets were allowed. Her golden retriever, Buddy, would finally have room to run around. The property manager, Mrs. Kim, was incredibly helpful during the move-in process. She handed over the keys with a warm smile and said, "You're going to love it here. The neighbors are mostly friendly and the community really looks out for each other." Then she paused and added with a slight frown, "Just keep in mind that we do have a homeowners association. Most of the board members are reasonable people, but there's one lady who can be a bit intense about the rules." Maya didn't think much of it at the time. She'd never lived in a community with an HOA before, but how hard could it be to follow a few basic rules? Her first week in the house was like a dream. The morning sun streamed through her kitchen windows as she sipped coffee and watched Buddy explore every corner of the fenced yard. She spent her evenings unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, finally feeling like she had a real home instead of just a place to sleep. The neighbors seemed wonderful too. On her third day, an elderly couple from next door knocked on her door carrying a plate of chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven. "Welcome to the neighborhood," said the woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Davis. "I'm Betty, and this is my husband Frank. We've been living here for 12 years, and it's such a lovely community." Frank nodded enthusiastically. "If you need anything at all, just holler. We're always happy to help a new neighbor get settled in." Maya was touched by their kindness. Back at her old apartment complex, she barely knew anyone's name, let alone received homemade cookies from strangers. The young couple across the street, Tony and Lisa, were equally welcoming. They had 2 small kids who immediately fell in love with Buddy. "We have a barbecue every Saturday evening," Lisa said while her 4-year-old daughter petted the patient golden retriever. "Nothing fancy, just burgers and hot dogs. You should totally join us this weekend." Maya felt like she'd stumbled into one of those perfect neighborhoods you see in movies. Everyone seemed genuinely nice. The houses were well maintained, and there was a real sense of community that she'd never experienced before. That feeling lasted exactly until day 8, when she met Linda. Maya was outside watering the small flower bed by her front porch when a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. Out stepped a woman who looked to be in her mid-50s, wearing a crisp white blouse and perfectly pressed khaki pants. Her blonde hair was styled in a way that probably required daily salon visits, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that immediately made Maya feel underdressed in her old jeans and gardening gloves. "You must be the new renter," the woman said, walking up Maya's driveway without being invited. Her smile looked practiced, like something she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "I'm Linda Hartwell. I'm the treasurer of our homeowners association, and I make it my business to personally welcome all new residents." Maya set down her watering can and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Hi, I'm Maya. Nice to meet you." Linda's eyes immediately began scanning Maya's front yard, taking in every detail. Her gaze lingered on the small garden gnome that Maya's grandmother had given her as a housewarming gift. It was nothing fancy, just a cheerful little ceramic figure holding a tiny watering can, but Linda stared at it like it was some kind of eyesore. "I see you've already started decorating," Linda said, her tone suggesting that decorating was somehow a bad thing. "I hope you took the time to review our community guidelines before adding any outdoor ornaments. We have very specific standards about what's appropriate for front yard displays." Maya felt a little defensive but tried to keep things friendly. "Oh, it's just a little gnome from my grandma. I didn't think a small decoration would be a problem." "Well," Linda said, pulling out her phone and taking a photo of the gnome, "technically anything visible from the street needs to comply with our aesthetic standards. I'll need to check the exact wording in our bylaws, but you might need to relocate that." Maya was stunned. She'd been living here for barely a week, and this woman was already finding problems with her grandmother's gift? "I'm sorry, I had no idea. Nobody mentioned anything about decorations when I signed the lease." Linda's expression softened slightly, but not in a reassuring way. It was more like the look adults give children when they're about to explain something unpleasant. That's exactly the issue we often have with renters, she said. Property owners receive all the HOA documentation when they purchase their homes, but renters sometimes don't get the full picture. It's not your fault, really, but it does create situations like this. The way she said renters made Maya's skin crawl. It wasn't just the word itself, but the tone, like she was talking about some kind of second-class citizen who couldn't be trusted to understand basic concepts. I'd be happy to follow whatever rules apply to everyone else, Maya said, trying to keep her voice level. Could you point me toward a copy of the guidelines? Of course, Linda replied, though she made no move to actually provide any documents. The main thing to remember is that when you're renting, you need to be extra careful about community standards. Property owners have a significant financial investment here, and their property values can be affected by how the neighborhood looks and feels. Renters don't have that same stake in the community, so they sometimes don't realize how their choices impact everyone else. Maya felt her cheeks getting warm. Was this woman seriously suggesting that because she paid rent instead of a mortgage, she cared less about being a good neighbor? I want to be respectful of the community, Maya said carefully. I'm planning to be here for a long time, and I definitely want to fit in. Linda nodded approvingly, as if Maya had just passed some kind of test. I'm glad to hear that. We've had some unfortunate experiences with previous renters who thought they could do whatever they wanted, without considering the consequences. One family actually tried to paint their front door bright purple without getting approval first. Can you imagine? Maya couldn't help but think that a purple door sounded kind of fun, but she kept that opinion to herself. I'll make sure to check before making any changes, she promised. Excellent, Linda said, but she was still looking around the yard like she was conducting some kind of inspection. Her gaze moved to Maya's car in the driveway, a reliable but older Honda that had gotten her through college and her first few years of working. It wasn't fancy, but it was paid off and ran perfectly. Linda didn't say anything about the car, but Maya caught the slight frown that crossed her face. It was the same look she'd given the garden gnome. Well, Linda said finally, I should let you get back to your gardening. Just remember, we're all here to maintain the quality and character of Oakwood Drive. I'm sure you understand. As Linda walked back to her spotless SUV, Maya stood in her driveway feeling like she'd just been warned about something, though she wasn't entirely sure what. The encounter had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had completely changed her mood about the beautiful afternoon. That evening, as she sat on her back porch with Buddy at her feet, Maya found herself looking at her grandmother's garden gnome with new eyes. Yesterday it had been a sweet reminder of family and home. Today it felt like evidence of some crime she hadn't known she was committing. But as the sun set and she heard the sound of children playing in the distance, Maya made a decision. She'd been nothing but polite and respectful since moving in. Her yard was neat. Her music was never loud. And she'd gone out of her way to be friendly to everyone she met. If Linda had a problem with a 4-inch garden gnome, that seemed like Linda's issue to deal with. Maya reached down and scratched Buddy behind the ears. What do you think, boy? Should we let some uptight HOA lady tell us we can't have Grandma's gnome in our own yard? Buddy wagged his tail, which Maya took as a vote of confidence. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd look up those community guidelines herself. But tonight she was going to enjoy her new home and her new neighborhood garden gnome and all. 3 weeks after settling into her new home, Maya decided it was time to properly introduce herself to the community. The idea came to her during one of her evening walks with Buddy around the neighborhood. She'd been chatting with different neighbors here and there, but she wanted to do something special to show her appreciation for how welcoming most people had been. A housewarming party seemed perfect. She could invite her co-workers, her family, and of course, all the neighbors who had been so kind to her. It would be a great way to bring everyone together and maybe even win over Linda, who had been giving her suspicious looks every time their paths crossed. Maya spent an entire weekend researching HOA rules and community guidelines. She wasn't taking any chances after Linda's comments about the garden gnome, which was still sitting proudly by her front door despite several more disapproving glances from the HOA treasurer. The community handbook was actually pretty reasonable. Social, Gatherings were completely allowed as long as you followed a few basic rules. Outdoor parties could go until 10 p.m. on weekends. You had to notify the HOA board at least 7 days in advance. And you needed to make sure there was adequate parking that didn't block anyone's driveway or mailbox. Maya made a checklist and went through every single requirement twice. She planned the party for a Saturday afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. and ending by 9:30, well before the 10 p.m. cutoff. She mapped out parking arrangements, even walking around the neighborhood, to identify spots where guests could park without bothering anyone. For the food, she decided to hire a local catering company that specialized in backyard barbecues. It would cost a bit more than doing it herself, but she wanted everything to be perfect. The caterers assured her they'd handle setup, cooking, and cleanup, which meant less chance of anything going wrong. Maya hand-wrote invitations on cute cardstock she found at the craft store. For her neighbors, she walked door to door, personally delivering each invitation and explaining her plans. Betty and Frank from next door were thrilled and immediately offered to bring their famous potato salad. Tony and Lisa across the street said they'd help with anything she needed and asked if their kids could invite a few friends from the neighborhood. "This is exactly what our community needs," Betty told her while admiring the invitation. "We used to have block parties all the time, but somehow they just stopped happening. It'll be wonderful to get everyone together again." Even Mrs. Peterson, from 2 houses down, who Maya had only spoken to briefly before, seemed excited about the party. "I'll bring my famous chocolate cake," she promised. "And don't worry about the cleanup afterward. Several of us can stay and help with that." Maya felt a warm glow of satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of community spirit she'd hoped to find when she moved to Oakwood Drive. The hardest part was deciding whether to invite Linda. On one hand, leaving out the HOA treasurer seemed like it might cause problems. On the other hand, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Linda would find something wrong with the party, no matter how carefully she planned it. In the end, she decided to take the high road. She knocked on Linda's door on a Tuesday evening, invitation in, hand and her most diplomatic smile ready. Linda answered the door wearing a silk bathrobe and holding a glass of white wine, looking annoyed at being interrupted. "Oh, it's you," she said without much enthusiasm. "What do you need?" Maya held out the invitation. "I'm having a housewarming party this Saturday and I wanted to personally invite you. It would mean a lot to have you there." Linda took the invitation but didn't open it. "A party? I hope you've gone through the proper channels for this. We can't have people just throwing gatherings without following procedure." "Of course," Maya said quickly. "I've already submitted all the paperwork to the HOA board. Everything's been approved, and I've made sure to follow every single guideline in the community handbook." Linda's eyebrows went up slightly, as if she was surprised that Maya had actually done her homework. "We'll see about that," she said. "I'll need to review your submission myself to make sure everything's in order." "That would be great," Maya replied, though Linda's tone made it clear this wasn't going to be a friendly review. "The party starts at 4 p.m. I really hope you can make it." Linda didn't commit either way, just closed the door with a curt, "We'll see." Walking back to her house, Maya felt a knot forming in her stomach. She'd done everything right, hadn't she? She'd followed every rule, gotten proper approval, and been as considerate as possible about timing and parking. What could Linda possibly find wrong with her plans? Over the next few days, Maya threw herself into party preparations. She bought decorations that were tasteful and not too flashy, ordered flowers for the tables, and even rented some extra chairs so everyone would have a place to sit. She tested her sound system to make sure the music wouldn't be too loud, and walked through her backyard multiple times, trying to see it through Linda's critical eyes. The caterers came by on Friday for a final walkthrough, and Maya felt confident everything would go smoothly. The weather forecast showed sunny skies and perfect temperatures. Her family was driving in from the next town over. Her co-workers were excited to see her new place, and most of the neighbors had confirmed they'd be there. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go wrong. On Friday evening, she noticed Linda walking past her house more frequently than usual. Linda always walked her small white dog around the neighborhood, but tonight she seemed to be taking an extra long route that involved multiple trips past Maya's front yard. Around 8 p.m., Linda stopped directly in front of Maya's house and pulled out her phone. Maya watched from her living room window as Linda took several photos of her front yard, including close-ups of the party decorations she'd put up earlier that day. Maya's heart sank. She'd been so careful about everything, but apparently Linda was building some kind of case against her anyway. The decorations were simple and tasteful, just some balloons tied to her mailbox and a small "Welcome Friends" banner hanging from her porch. Nothing that violated any rules she could think of. When Linda noticed Maya watching from the window, she gave a little wave that somehow managed to look more like a warning than a greeting. Then she continued her walk, though Maya noticed she took one more photo of the front of the house before disappearing around the corner. That night, Maya barely slept. She kept going over every detail of her party plans, wondering what Linda might have found to complain about. She'd submitted her notification 10 days early, not just the required 7. She'd hired professional caterers to avoid any food safety issues. She'd even bought special biodegradable plates and cups to show she cared about the environment. Maya woke up Saturday morning with dark circles under her eyes but determination in her heart. She'd done everything right. Her neighbors were excited about the party, and she wasn't going to let Linda's intimidation tactics ruin what should be a wonderful day. As she let Buddy out into the backyard and started setting up tables, Maya made herself a promise. She was going to throw the best housewarming party Oakwood Drive had seen in years, and if Linda wanted to find problems with it, she'd have to work pretty hard to come up with any legitimate complaints. The caterers arrived right on schedule at 2 p.m., and Maya felt her confidence returning as they efficiently set up their equipment and started preparing food. The weather was perfect, her house looked welcoming, and in just 2 hours, her friends and neighbors would be celebrating with her. What could possibly go wrong? Saturday afternoon arrived with perfect blue skies and a gentle breeze that made Maya's backyard feel like something out of a magazine. By 4 o'clock, her housewarming party was in full swing, and everything was going even better than she'd hoped. The caterers had outdone themselves with a spread of barbecue favorites that had everyone talking. Maya's coworker Jessica was deep in conversation with Betty and Frank about gardening tips, while Tony and Lisa's kids were running around the yard playing tag with 3 other neighborhood children who'd come with their parents. Maya's mom and dad had driven over from the next town and were absolutely charmed by the neighbors. "Honey, you really found yourself a wonderful community," her mom whispered, as they watched old Mr. Henderson from down the street teaching some kids how to throw a frisbee properly. Even Maya's usually grumpy teenage brother Alex was having a good time, bonding with Tony over their shared love of vintage comic books. Maya couldn't help but smile as she watched different groups of people mixing and mingling naturally. This was exactly what she'd envisioned when she planned the party. The music was playing at a perfect volume, loud enough to create a festive atmosphere, but quiet enough that people could have conversations without shouting. Maya had been checking the time regularly, and at 6:15, they were still well within all the community guidelines she'd studied so carefully. Mrs. Peterson had brought her famous chocolate cake, just as promised, and it was already half gone. Betty's potato salad was a huge hit, and Maya made a mental note to ask for the recipe. Several neighbors had complimented the caterer's barbecue sauce, and Maya was already thinking about hiring the same company for future gatherings. She was refilling the lemonade pitcher when she noticed Linda marching up her driveway with determined steps and a clipboard clutched in her hand. Maya's stomach immediately dropped, but she tried to stay optimistic. Maybe Linda had decided to join the party after all. That hope lasted about 3 seconds. Linda wasn't alone. She had 2 people with her that Maya had never seen before. A stern-looking man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt and khakis, and a woman about Linda's age with short gray hair and a permanent frown. They looked like they were on some kind of official mission. "Excuse me, everyone," Linda called out loudly, her voice cutting through the cheerful conversations and laughter. "I need everyone's attention right now." The backyard slowly grew quiet as people turned to see what was happening. Maya's heart started beating faster, but she put on her most polite smile and walked over to greet Linda and her companions. "Hi, Linda, I'm so glad you could make it, Maya said, though Linda's expression made it clear this wasn't a social visit. Can I get you something to drink? The caterers made fresh lemonade, and the barbecue is really fantastic. Linda completely ignored Maya's attempt at hospitality. Instead, she held up her clipboard like some kind of official document and announced in a voice loud enough for the entire party to hear, "This gathering is officially over. I'm shutting it down immediately on behalf of the Homeowners Association." Maya felt like she'd been slapped. Around the yard, her guests looked confused and uncomfortable. Her dad stepped closer, his protective instincts kicking in, while her mom put a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "I'm sorry, what?" Maya managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Linda, I don't understand. I followed all the rules. I have the approval paperwork right inside if you need to see it." "I don't care what paperwork you think you have," Linda snapped, her voice getting louder and more aggressive. "The noise level is completely unacceptable. There are way too many cars cluttering up our streets, and frankly, this whole situation is exactly why renters shouldn't be allowed to host large gatherings in residential communities." Maya felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. "Linda, please. The music isn't loud at all, and I coordinated all the parking with the neighbors. We're not blocking anyone's driveway or mailbox, I made sure of that." But Linda was just getting started. She turned to address Maya's guests directly, her voice dripping with authority and condescension. "I'm Linda Hartwell, treasurer of the Oakwood Drive Homeowners Association. This party is creating multiple violations of our community standards, and I'm requiring everyone to leave the premises immediately." Maya's coworker David looked confused. "But it's only 6:30, he said politely, "and everything seems pretty calm to me." Linda whirled around to face him, her eyes flashing with anger. "Are you questioning my authority? I've been living in this community for 15 years and I know our rules better than anyone. This renter," she said, pointing at Maya like she was some kind of criminal, "has no business disrupting our peaceful neighborhood with her loud parties and crowds of strangers." The way Linda said renter made Maya's skin crawl. It wasn't just a description, it was an insult, delivered with the kind of venom usually reserved for much worse things. Betty stepped forward, her usually sweet demeanor replaced by a surprising firmness. "Now hold on just a minute, Linda. Maya has been nothing but considerate since she moved in. This is a lovely party, and she followed all the proper procedures. Don't think I won't remember who supported this chaos." Linda shot back, pointing her finger at Betty with genuine menace in her voice. "Everyone who encouraged this renter to think she could take over our community will face consequences." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Linda was actually threatening her neighbors for attending a perfectly legal, properly approved party. The woman who'd brought two strangers to intimidate everyone was calling Maya's gathering chaotic. Frank stepped up beside his wife, his usually gentle face showing real anger. "Linda, you're out of line here. This young lady has been more respectful of community standards than half the homeowners on this street. You're the one causing a disturbance." "Excuse me?" Linda's voice rose to nearly a shout. "I'm trying to protect property values and community standards from people who have no investment in this neighborhood. Renters come and go whenever they please. They don't care about maintaining the quality of life that the rest of us work so hard to preserve." Maya felt tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd never been treated like a second-class citizen because of how she paid for her housing, and the humiliation was overwhelming. All around her, neighbors and friends were witnessing this horrible woman tear her down in front of everyone she cared about. "I do care about this community," Maya said, her voice shaking but determined. "I pay my rent every month, I keep my yard neat, I'm friendly to my neighbors, and I followed every single rule for this party. I have just as much right to live here peacefully as anyone else." "No, you don't," Linda snarled, stepping closer to Maya in a way that felt genuinely threatening. "You have no stake in property values, no long-term commitment to this neighborhood, and no right to make decisions that affect homeowners who actually belong here. These people need to leave now, or I'm calling the police to remove them for trespassing." Maya's brother Alex, who'd been quietly listening to the whole exchange, stepped protectively beside his sister. "Lady, you need to back up and calm down. You're the only one here causing any kind of problem." Linda turned her fury on the teenager. "Don't you dare tell me what to do, young man. You're trespassing on community property, and I have every right to have you arrested." That's when Maya realized that Linda had completely lost touch with reality. The backyard where they were standing was Maya's rental property, not community space. Linda was so consumed with her power trip that she wasn't even making sense anymore. But the damage was already done. Several of Maya's guests were quietly gathering their things, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Her mom was looking worried. Her dad was getting that protective look that meant trouble was coming. And the neighborhood kids had stopped playing and were staring at the scary lady who was yelling at everyone. Maya looked around at her beautiful party that had been going so perfectly just minutes before, the decorations she'd chosen so carefully, the food that everyone had been enjoying, the conversations and laughter that had filled her backyard. All of it was being destroyed by one angry woman who couldn't stand the idea of a renter being happy in her precious community. As Linda pulled out her phone and started dialing, Maya realized that her perfect housewarming party was about to become something much bigger and much worse than she'd ever imagined. Despite Linda's threats and aggressive behavior, Maya's neighbors weren't backing down. If anything, seeing their new friend being treated so unfairly seemed to make them more determined to stand their ground. Tony walked over to the grill where he'd been cooking burgers just minutes before and calmly flipped a few patties. "I'm not going anywhere," he said in a steady voice. "This is a great party. Maya's been nothing but respectful to everyone, and I'm enjoying spending time with my neighbors." Lisa nodded in agreement, putting her arm around her 4-year-old daughter who was looking confused by all the shouting. "Sweetie, why don't you go play with Buddy for a bit?" she told her daughter, then looked directly at Linda. "We've lived here for 3 years, and this is the nicest community gathering we've ever had. Maya did everything right." Old Mr. Henderson, who'd been quietly sitting in a lawn chair enjoying his hamburger, spoke up in his gravelly voice. "Been living on this street for 22 years, and I've never seen anyone cause problems at a neighborhood party except for you, Linda. You're being ridiculous." Maya felt a surge of gratitude for her neighbor's support, but she could see that their defense of her was only making Linda angrier. The HOA treasurer's face was getting redder by the minute, and she kept scribbling notes on her clipboard like she was building a case against everyone present. "Fine," Linda snapped, pointing her pen at each person who'd spoken up. "Don't say I didn't warn you. When property values start dropping because this neighborhood turns into a free-for-all, remember that you all chose to support chaos over community standards." Maya's dad, who'd been watching the whole situation with growing concern, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I think you need to take a step back and calm down. My daughter has done nothing wrong here, and you're the only one causing any kind of disturbance." Linda turned her fury on Maya's father, her voice rising to a near shout. "Don't tell me what to do on my own property. I don't know who you people think you are, but you're all trespassing on community space, and I have every right to have you removed." "This is Maya's backyard," Frank pointed out gently. "She pays rent here, just like homeowners pay mortgages. It's her space during her lease period. Renters have no real rights," Linda shot back, her voice dripping with contempt. "A lease is just a temporary arrangement. Real community members are the ones who own property and have actual investment in maintaining standards." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Linda wasn't just being unreasonable about the party. She was arguing that renters were somehow less deserving of basic respect and community membership than homeowners. "That's not how the law works," Maya's brother Alex said, his teenage voice cracking slightly with emotion. "My sister pays to live here. She follows all the rules, and she's been nicer to these neighbors than most people are to their own families." Linda's response was swift and vicious. "I don't need some kid lecturing me about property law. You're all trespassing, and if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police to have you arrested for disturbing the peace." "You're the only one disturbing the peace," Betty said, her voice shaking with anger. "Maya, honey, don't let this woman bully you. You've done nothing wrong." That's when Linda completely lost control. She started pulling out her phone and taking pictures of everyone at the party, focusing particularly on the people who'd spoken up in Maya's defense. I'm documenting every single person who participated in this illegal gathering, she announced. These photos will be part of my complaint to the HOA board and the police. Maya's coworker, Jessica, looked concerned. Is she allowed to take pictures of us without permission? I can photograph whatever I want on community property, Linda declared, though they were clearly in Maya's backyard, not on any community space. Maya watched in horror as Linda snapped photos of her family, her coworkers, and her neighbors. People who'd come to celebrate her new home were now being treated like criminals by someone who had no authority to do what she was doing. Linda, please stop taking pictures of my guests, Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the panic rising in her chest. You're making everyone uncomfortable, and this is supposed to be a fun neighborhood gathering. I'll stop when you shut down this illegal party and get these people off community property, Linda snapped back. Until then, I'm documenting everything for my police report. That's when Maya realized Linda was serious about calling the police. Her mind raced through everything that could go wrong. What if the officers didn't understand the situation? What if they sided with Linda because she was an HOA board member? What if Maya's friends got in trouble just for attending her party? There's no need to involve the police, Maya said desperately. If you're concerned about the party, we can talk about it. Maybe we can find a compromise. The only compromise is everyone leaving right now, Linda replied, her finger hovering over her phone's keypad. You have 60 seconds to start clearing people out, or I'm making the call. Maya looked around at her guests. Her parents looked worried but supportive. Her brother was clearly angry but trying to stay calm for her sake. Her neighbors were shaking their heads in disbelief at Linda's behavior. Her co-workers seemed confused about how a simple housewarming party had turned into such a confrontation. Linda, this is crazy, Tony said, his voice showing real frustration. The party's been going for less than 3 hours, it's not even 7 p.m. yet, and nobody's doing anything wrong. You're creating a problem where none existed. 60 seconds, Linda repeated, starting to dial numbers on her phone. Maya felt trapped. She could ask everyone to leave to avoid police involvement, but that would mean letting Linda win through intimidation and threats. It would also mean accepting that renters really did have fewer rights in this community than homeowners. But she also couldn't bear the thought of her family and friends getting caught up in police involvement because of her decision to throw a party. Please don't call the police, Maya said quietly. Just tell me what you want me to do to make this situation better. Linda looked triumphant, like she'd finally gotten the upper hand. I want every single person who doesn't live on this street to leave immediately. I want the music turned off, the decorations taken down, and a guarantee that nothing like this will happen again without proper advance coordination with the HOA board. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes. Everything Linda was demanding went far beyond what was required by community guidelines. She was essentially demanding that Maya surrender her right to have friends over or host any kind of gathering. That's not reasonable, Frank said firmly. Maya followed all the proper procedures, and she has the same rights as any other resident. No, she doesn't, Linda snapped. And if you keep interfering with my authority as an HOA board member, you'll be facing violations too. That's when Maya saw Linda's finger hit the final digit on her phone. Despite all the attempts at reasoning and compromise, Linda was making good on her threat to call the police. Maya watched in disbelief as Linda held the phone to her ear, preparing to report a major disturbance at what had been, just an hour ago, the perfect neighborhood party. As Linda started talking to the police dispatcher, Maya realized that her simple housewarming party was about to become something much bigger and more serious than anyone had imagined. Within 10 minutes of Linda's phone call, 2 police cars pulled up in front of Maya's house. Maya's heart was pounding as she watched Officers Rodriguez and Johnson step out of their vehicles and walk up her driveway. She'd never had to deal with police at her home before, and despite knowing she'd done nothing wrong, she felt incredibly nervous. The officers looked professional and calm as they approached the backyard where everyone was still gathered. Maya noticed that her party guests had naturally formed a quiet, respectful group, while Linda stood off to the side with her clipboard, looking like she was preparing for some kind of presentation. Officer Rodriguez, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, spoke first. We received a call about a disturbance at this address. Could someone explain what's going on here? Maya stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. "Hi, officers, I'm Maya, and this is my house. Well, I rent it. I'm having a housewarming party that was properly approved by the HOA board. I have all the paperwork inside if you need to see it." "That won't be necessary right now, officer," Johnson said gently. He was younger than his partner and had a reassuring way of speaking. "Can you tell us about the complaint?" Before Maya could answer, Linda pushed forward with her clipboard held high. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I'm Linda Hartwell, treasurer of the Oakwood Drive Homeowners Association, and this renter has been creating a major disturbance all afternoon." Officer Rodriguez looked around the backyard, taking in the quiet conversations, the neatly arranged tables, and the small group of people standing calmly with plates of food in their hands. "What kind of disturbance are we talking about?" "Excessive noise, overcrowding, parking violations, and complete disregard for community standards," Linda rattled off from her list. "As an HOA board member, I have the authority to shut down gatherings that violate our rules, and this woman has been completely uncooperative." Officer Johnson pulled out a small notebook. "Ma'am, what time did this party start?" 4 o'clock, Maya answered quickly. "It was scheduled to end by 9:30, well before the 10 p.m. noise ordinance." The officer checked his watch. "It's 7:15 now. And the music?" He gestured toward Maya's small Bluetooth speaker, which was playing soft background music at a volume that barely carried beyond the immediate party area. "The music's been at the same level all afternoon," Tony chimed in. "I live across the street, and I could barely hear it from my front porch." Officer Rodriguez turned to Linda. "What specific noise complaint do you have? Because I'm having trouble hearing any excessive sound from out here." Linda's face was getting red again. "It's not just about noise levels, it's about the principle. Renters shouldn't be allowed to host large gatherings that disrupt the community. They don't have the same investment in property values that homeowners do." Maya watched the officers exchange a quick glance. Officer Johnson made a note in his book. "Ma'am, could you clarify what authority you have to shut down a legally approved gathering?" Officer Rodriguez asked Linda directly. "I'm the HOA treasurer," Linda repeated, as if that explained everything. "I've been living in this community for 15 years, and I know what's best for property values and community standards. But do you have legal authority to disperse a gathering that's following local noise ordinances and community guidelines?" the officer pressed. Linda hesitated for the first time since the confrontation began. "Well, as a board member, I have the responsibility to enforce community standards." Officer Johnson looked at Maya. "Do you have documentation showing this party was approved through proper channels?" "Yes, absolutely, I can get it right now." Maya hurried into her house and returned with a folder containing her HOA notification form, the board's approval letter, and copies of all the community guidelines she'd followed. Officer Rodriguez reviewed the papers carefully while Officer Johnson continued talking to the group. "Has anyone here been asked to leave by the homeowner or renter?" "No," several people said at once. Betty stepped forward. "Officers, I've lived next door for 12 years, and Maya has been the most considerate neighbor we've ever had. This party has been lovely and quiet. Linda's the only one who's been causing any disturbance." "That's completely untrue," Linda snapped, her voice rising sharply. "These people are all biased because they're friends with the renter. I'm the only one looking out for the real homeowners in this community." "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice," Officer Johnson said firmly. "You're currently the loudest person at this gathering." That comment seemed to set Linda off completely. "Don't tell me to lower my voice. I called you here to remove these people, not to lecture me about noise levels. I'm a respected member of this community, and I demand that you do your job." Officer Rodriguez looked up from Maya's paperwork. "Everything here appears to be in order. The party was properly approved, it's within permitted hours, and I don't observe any violations of local ordinances." "This is ridiculous," Linda exploded. "You're supposed to be helping homeowners maintain their property values, not supporting renters who want to turn our neighborhood into a party zone." "Ma'am, Property ownership doesn't give anyone special rights to control their neighbor's legal activities, Officer Johnson explained patiently. Everyone who lives in a community, whether they rent or own, has the same basic rights. Maya felt a surge of relief and validation. Finally, someone in authority was confirming what she'd believed all along, that she had the same right to live peacefully in her community as anyone else. But Linda wasn't done. This is exactly the problem with law enforcement today. You don't understand property law or community standards. I shouldn't have to explain to you why homeowners' rights are more important than renters' temporary arrangements. Officer Rodriguez closed Maya's folder and handed it back to her. Your party appears to be completely legal and properly conducted. You're free to continue your gathering. What? Linda's voice reached a new level of outrage. You're not going to make them leave? You're not going to cite them for disturbing the peace? Ma'am, the only disturbance we've observed has been your behavior, Officer Johnson said clearly. I need you to calm down and step back. I will not calm down, Linda shouted, stepping closer to the officers instead of backing away. You people don't know how to do your jobs. I'm calling your supervisor and I'm filing complaints against both of you for failing to enforce community standards. Ma'am, you need to step back right now, Officer Rodriguez warned, her tone becoming more serious. Instead of complying, Linda moved even closer to Officer Johnson, waving her clipboard in his face. Don't you dare threaten me. I pay taxes in this community. I vote, and I have every right to demand proper law enforcement. Maya watched in shock as Linda actually poked Officer Johnson in the chest with her finger while shouting about incompetent police work. The transformation was complete. The woman who'd claimed to be protecting community standards was now the one creating an actual public disturbance. Ma'am, you're under arrest for disorderly conduct and interference with police officers, Officer Rodriguez announced, pulling out her handcuffs. As the officers moved to arrest Linda, she began screaming about her rights and threatening to sue everyone present. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who'd called police to break up a peaceful party was now the only person being taken away in handcuffs. Maya looked around at her neighbors and friends, all of whom seemed as stunned as she was. Her perfect housewarming party had turned into something none of them could have imagined, but somehow, justice had prevailed. As Linda's angry voice faded, into the distance the party guests slowly began to relax and return to their conversations. Maya realized that while this hadn't been the housewarming party she'd planned, it had certainly been one that no one would ever forget.